I wanted to ask you, Berch, about last week's biggest news story, which was Mack Hansen's suspension and Chris Busby's potential retirement from the game and how all of that shook out. Murray and I spoke about it on Friday a little bit on the free pod, and we wanted to sort of throw it forward to today just to give it a little bit more breathing space. I said it was going to come in hot just with the inexorable passing of time. I've cooled down a little bit, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on it.
Well, what are we going to come in hot on what? What's your feeling of?
So, to me, the suspension is fine, and the suspended fine to Connacht is understandable. And I would say, yeah, he should apologise personally to Chris Busby, public apology as well. We get that. The things that I was annoyed by were the um, the second and third parts of the additional sorts of punishments in the fine print, if you like. So the fact that he has to undertake an appropriate course related to match officiating, and the main one for me was that Connacht have to run an education session with their players about how to conduct themselves in post-match media sessions and interactions with the media. Like, that sticks in my craw particularly because it reminds me of like being in primary school where the whole class would get extra homework based on one student's indiscretion, you know? And like, when you walk away from that, are you thinking, oh, that guy has let us down there? Or are you thinking, my teacher's a dickhead? You know, I know what I was thinking anyway. So I just think it's so counterproductive. And the teacher in this instance isn't Chris Busby, to be clear, it's CORC. But for a Connacht player, it's the system, really, inverted commas. You're kind of thinking, like, we're being made an example of for no reason. Like, really, the whole conversation is about we want a sense of human decency to pervade the game, right? Respect for referees, but equally players need to be respected. And to whatever degree you feel Mack Hansen forfeited his right to respect based on what he had said, his teammates didn't do a single thing. So, like, the idea that they're being punished to me is counterproductive entirely. And that's probably why I was initially going to come in hot. I think overall the messaging of this is a little bit off because in order to foster respect for referees, and I mean from players and from fans, and it's the fans, by the way, who, like, a load of demented freaks are sliding into their DMs, abusing them, or tracking down their family members and abusing them. I think it needs to be a little bit more conciliatory than really make an example of an entire squad based on the comments of one player. I think that drives a further wedge into the whole thing more than anything. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what I think. Sorry.
No, it doesn't. No, I'm interested. I didn't hear you on Friday. I'm interested in your in that, and I think, to be honest, it's aligned very much to how I feel. So, for me, right, as someone who loves the game, I actually also love the characters and the personalities and want to know more about them, right? So, I would say, probably over the last 2 or 3 years, the players that I've got to chat to from a media point of view are in front of an audience, right? The most interesting ones are Mack, James Lowe, Archie Snyman, Jordy Barrett, Rabbi Slimani, right? Okay, and that's
so no Irish-born players.
No,
and that's an important point.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the Irish players are bad, but the best, the most relaxed, the people you kind of would enjoy having a beer with that I have met. The majority of them are Johnny Sexton as well, because he is very interesting, and he wasn't afraid to call it or whatever. So, but in general, it's very difficult to really feel that you're getting anything more than PR, right? And that for me, that's sad, because I don't for a second think that those players, those Irish players, don't have. I haven't interviewed Pete, right? But Pete obviously has, etc. But I'm talking about that Pete's older, right? The next generation, and the idea that they should do more media training. Fuck, man. I don't look forward to hearing them if they get more media training, you know. And I've said this before. I think they're doing themselves a disservice by being so bland. But the problem is, obviously you can't do what Mack did. So when Mack said that, I knew he was going to get suspended, right? And I knew he was going to get suspended. And the challenge you have now, Gavin, is the solution to Mack's outburst actually, I would say, has the players pissed off, right? Because they will feel that they're not being listened to. They're being made to go to school again, and they're being treated like school kids. And my good feeling is the referees don't like it either, because it actually hasn't helped them. It hasn't helped them. It's actually made them seem to be school teacher esque, even though I don't actually think they were involved
They weren't.
in this. They weren't, right. So that's the challenge, is that somebody in the middle, which is the governing bodies or the competition, have tried to fix this and have probably made it worse, right?
Yeah.
Bar the fact that players now know clearly that they can't do what Mack did, and obviously that will stop that, you would imagine, or certainly limit it. But it doesn't really create that respect that they say on a social media post. That's important. You know what I mean? And that's the bullshit. Like, I don't think that's. I know there's people who get paid a lot more money than I do to come up with these PR statements and slogans and things like that, and they will convince the stakeholders that they add massive value and they change people's opinions. I don't feel genuinely that most level-headed people will get inspired by how this has been. No, but you know what I mean, or change their opinion on this. So that's the challenge. I think the officials were probably left hanging for maybe too long while they got the whole thing organized. So if you really care about this, you get that hearing in 3 days. You know what I mean? You get a hearing in 3 days, and you don't, and you deal with Mack, and you don't punish the others, or kind of say, look, at the reason this happened because you don't understand how to speak to the media. Effectively, you're seeing someone who opened up emotionally. It wasn't. He needs to get punished for it, because we don't do that, or you don't do it. But it's actually the punishment. The punishment is more auditory than it needs to be. It needs to be, and you need to listen to them as well. You need to listen to the players as well in some way and find a common ground. So that's my feeling on it. So I'm aligned with you on it. I don't think actually the referees feel a huge amount better about themselves now. Players don't feel better about referees. So have we actually got anywhere, really?
No, that really is why I was going to come in. I think it is counterintuitive almost across the board. I think you can say that Hansen deserved a suspension, or that Connacht deserved an arbitrary fine. I think that would have been grand. Here, listen, if you're sitting there and you're Chris Busby and you read Hansen's embargoed comments in which he said, "Oh, it was like we were playing against 16 men," then you would be entitled to think, "Here, man, fuck you. I was doing my job. I might not have gotten everything right, but you can't call into question my integrity like that." Hansen called out a lot of the quote unquote bullshit in his post match presser. Well, that was bullshit to say that, right? Yeah. So, that's wrong. You can't be saying that and expect to get away with it. I don't think he would have expected to get away with it at all. But I also don't think Busby necessarily, he clearly wasn't the one who was like, "Oh, Hansen needs to be suspended," or whatever. And it is easy to conflate two separate issues where Busby is set to retire and people will point towards Hansen's comments or his questioning of Busby's integrity. Listen, that happens, that's going to happen during games, that'll happen after games on social media, not necessarily directly from players all of the time, but that wouldn't have been Busby's first rodeo with that. Every referee who listens to this podcast, or anyone who's ever refereed a game, will have experienced that various times.